Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this brief session focusing on change management tools. Before I begin the session, I'd like to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. We are in week 5 of M365 May. Not only that, we're on the final day of M365 May. So thank you for sticking with the whole conference and jumping in on the last day. Today we have a fantastic day with a number of focused sessions within a theme, very strong theme of change management today and adoption. So thanks for joining my session. I hope you enjoy the number of sessions today. Look out for a really great panel we have this afternoon, along with our fantastic lock note. I am presenting, as we all are, working remotely today, and I am accompanied by my schnauzer, who did just lose it at the postman. So if I do get any side commentary, I apologise if I mute suddenly. So beyond thanking our sponsors, second to that, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. Welcome to everyone participating wherever you are, and we just wanted to, through the conference, take this moment through our sessions to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land across Australia and also in New Zealand. M365 May was focused on presenting speakers from Australia and New Zealand to showcase the talent that we have on this side of the world. So we thought it was important to also recognise our heritage. Also, as part of the conference, not contract, is we have a code of conduct. As myself on the planning committee, we took it very seriously that we wanted to plan a conference that was highly professional, polished, and supported everyone that was involved. So we did ensure that the conference had a code of conduct. If you do want to know more about the code of conduct, see the website, or feel free to contact either of the planning committee through one of the M365 groups or accounts if you feel that you wish to discuss anything further. But we do take everything quite seriously, and we just really hope that everyone's constructive and respectful, and most importantly, kind to our speakers, because everything being done in the conference is volunteer and everyone's getting involved on their own time. So before I go into this topic, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. So my name is Megan, and I'm the Principal Consultant for Adoption and Change Management at InSync Technology. And along with that, I'm also a Microsoft MVP. So I've been working with Office 365 for a number of years, but first and foremost, I'm a change manager. I spent a number of years in project management, but moved into change management about 10 years ago. And I did that within a Microsoft partner. So the thing about me is that I've been solely focused in, I guess, in the niche of Office 365 and change for about 8 solid years now. And I've seen those projects transform over time in the way we've had to respond and support organisations through the way the product has enhanced over time. I'm not a technical person. My background's actually psychology. So I'm really, really obsessed with people, change and technology, and what we do to them when we either do an implementation or when Microsoft changes features and does things to us. So for me, it's all about supporting end users within an organisation and helping those organisations strategize and plan for the adoption of the tools, either bringing them in or along the journey of how things enhance over time. So there's some of my details if you do want to reach out at all. So the focus of today is I have actually probably spent years and years in project land trying to convince the IT manager or the IT leader or the project sponsor that it's important to include change management. In the early years, it was quite challenging getting them to see the value of what is change management and why should we listen to me, essentially. So what I didn't want to do was do another change management and the importance of it or method. I think particularly a lot of people who are dialing into these sessions, a lot of people who attend conferences, or the discussions that we have around adoption in Office 365, we have spent a lot of time already talking about, ProSci, other methods and the importance of it. And there will be, I'm sure, some great discussions today as well to continue that journey and that topic. What I wanted to add today when I thought about how could I get involved in the conference and contribute something that might be also useful is something a bit more punchy, is really just when I think about all the methods and journeys and everything to do with Office 365 in project land, I thought about tools, and that was out of everything we do to support customers, what are the things that are the go-tos that I think are really valuable? Now, I'm not saying don't do end-to-end strong change management method. I guess what I'm saying is when you think about the method that you have in place and the structure you follow, these are just some tools that I think if you don't use them or work in this way already, consider throwing them into your bucket of collateral. So I'm focusing on 3 key things today that I think are really valuable. The first one is going to be looking at impacts, so an impact assessment, but talking a bit about how you can bring impact assessments into these type of projects. The second is having a strategy. Now, that might seem really obvious, but you'd be surprised the number of projects that don't have a plan, whether that be a detailed plan for the technical journey, but mostly what is the overarching plan and how does this technical change fit into the organisation and how does it all come together? And then this is probably the least considered aspect of Office 365 projects, and that is the journey of your people. Again, to some really experienced, particularly change managers, you'd think you're in that place and working in that space all the time. But again, because Microsoft 365 projects are heavily technical and usually led by IT, there isn't a business perspective usually at the forefront or the people. So I'm going to just talk about and show you some tools and talk about examples of why and how I focus in these key areas. Okay, so let's dive into impacts. Now, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, actually, in conferences, whether it be Ignite in November last year or whether it even be Ignite the Tour in Sydney in this year in Feb, so much focus on Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is the space that a lot of people are working in right now. It's the application that has been new to organisations, particularly in the last 12 months. And in the last 3 months, it's been the application that organisations have sought urgently to help people work from home. But it's important to remember that Office or Microsoft 365 has many, many projects that are in that space, and here are just a few. So my work has moved over the years across Exchange migrations, across voice and calling projects, and a number of security elements. I would say 10 years ago or 8 years ago, our focus was usually an Exchange migration, and that was often coupled with Skype and maybe OneDrive. So those were more about launching organisations into the cloud to remove the focus or the need for servers and file shares, introducing cloud libraries, and that was probably because of some need, whether it be cost or infrastructure. These days, though, projects are really different. A lot of organisations have been in Office 365 for quite a while, but maybe they're making some changes to security, or maybe they're moving from Skype to Teams. What I just wanted to point out here, though, was just think about the number of aspects that go on as part of the broad Microsoft platform. So it's not about just enabling something here, it's about thinking about how it all comes together and the impact on your people. So whether you're part of a major, I guess, enterprise piece of work, when assessing change management for your projects or working within a large organisation, you need to complete your assessment in a very detailed way across departments, user groups, and all areas of your technical solution, such as there could be call flows or hardware, there could be team structure and configuration, or a security app set up and the process around that. It's important to have a realistic view of the experience of your people and the impact from that change. Be careful that the person completing the impact assessment understands the experience of your people across their role in the business, maybe gender, culture, or generational differences. Is the person doing the impact assessment from your IT team? And do they think everything that's coming in from this project is just easy and low key? Or are they from the business? Are they being too hypersensitive to new features and maybe less savvy than the status quo? Think about all these things, because when you're looking at the impact, someone who's highly technical or highly savvy might think a new feature is, oh yeah, you know, easy, that'll pop up and people will deal with it. But there are often people at the other end of that experience who do find change really hard, particularly in technology. And what you think is simple to them might freak them out on day one and really, really bother them. Consider a cross-section for this review. So The example image I have here is from a previous project where it was quite a major impact assessment. And so we were looking constantly across the roles, the processes, the policies, the system, and all that sort of detail. It's important to get a number of people involved so we ensure that we're not being swayed by one person's perspective and maybe considering it to be too complex or too simple. Having a really great tool to guide your process is really important. Go through the motions of reviewing all the categories and also the mitigation to ensure that you're thinking through how can we support our people. Is it just that we need to give them a heads up that a button's moved or that there's a new feature when you run a meeting? Or do they need to be taken on a journey to really understand and have context around what's going on? Understand what's more severe and how features or configuration impacts people. So there are those changes that are forced and immediate, such as when you come into work on a Monday morning and suddenly all your calls come through this app on your computer instead of the desk phone that you'd used for years and years that's sitting next to it on the desk. Think through the features that people will use across their day versus something that they need to be motivated to use, like going into Yammer or going into Teams and taking part in the posts area. Some people still don't want to move away from reply all email conversations because that's the way they've always done it. And for a security project or even an Exchange migration, have a think about will they risk being locked out of their inbox or their calendar not being accessible from their mobile? Years ago, when we used to do Exchange migrations, which were at the centre of a project, along with maybe OneDrive or other apps, one of the key things was it would be a weekend cutover. Staff would come in on the Monday morning and there'd be something that would happen when they'd come in the door and sit down at their computer or open it for the first time. And back then we used to recommend on the Friday, print off your calendar for next week before you go home. It's funny to think now of doing that, of saying print off something on paper. So if something happens on Monday to your calendar, you know where your meetings are. But that was the way it worked back then, because sometimes there is a risk that maybe the app on their mobile will lock them out, and not being able to know when your next meeting is on a Monday morning is incredibly frustrating, particularly for a senior leader. So these are the things to think through with these projects. And by doing this impact assessment, you'll really start to understand and nut out where the problems will be. Now, for some people, that probably all seemed like too much hard work, and it can seem like overkill. What if we're just implementing MFA? Or to some, they might think we're just bringing in Teams and people will work it out. So for some Microsoft projects, you can have a lighter approach that still helps address the detail. So it doesn't have to be a major sort of enterprise, big spreadsheet tool that you use to assess the impact. You just need to make sure that you take time to sense check so you know what will impact productivity and cause frustration. What I've got on this slide is just a table, and this is even at the lowest level. I often, when I work with the technical teams, just use a table like this to understand what are you actually doing, what is going to happen, what is the technical stuff going on, so I personally can understand all the little ways that staff will get impacted to really make some decisions. And what I want to do really briefly is just take you through a bit more of this specific document to show you a bit more about what I mean. So I have this open on the screen, and I just want to touch on a couple of key areas. So, sorry, I was just checking one of the questions. So what I wanted to show here is essentially with this specific project to give you an idea of, to the IT team, they were probably just bringing in a couple of changes to the platform for security reasons or an Exchange migration as well. But the things that stood out to me in this project were a couple of details. So for example, on Monday morning when staff come in, after the Exchange migrations happened on the weekend, all staff members needed to be aware that this deployment agent needed to run on their computer before Outlook would open and load all their email. So just being that they needed to know that had to happen is enough of an impact on a Monday to disrupt their day. They also had a change to the login experience in what would happen when they went into Outlook. They also had to move from using the native Mail client app on a mobile and actually install the Outlook app and then set it up and configure that for their work email. That in itself, personally, I think, is something that confuses a lot of people. Most people, when they have email set up on their mobile, someone may have done it for them, particularly on a work phone, and then it was just handed to them to use. So already there's a few things that would happen to the staff to have them feeling a bit frazzled on day one. Now, in this case, they changed from a webmail URL that took them into their inbox to OA. And they also then were introduced to the Office 365 portal. So for anyone who knows a bit more about the portal, you log in and you don't just go to your inbox, you go to a screen that has all the apps that you have available according to your license. So even just introducing the portal as a new place to go, maybe they would now see Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Sway, apps that they've never heard of, and I'm sure Service Desk are not highly skilled at to help them understand how to use. There were things that were problems during cutover, like room bookings and reoccurring meetings had issues, and that was quite major. But even at the tail end, things like focused inbox and conversations in Outlook, you know how it starts nesting your email or using its own intelligence to change the way it appears in your inbox. Those can really confuse people when they're new. So as you can see, by just doing a sense check, for me, this is probably sitting down for 30 to 60 minutes with the technical lead and saying, talk me through it. What are all the bits and pieces that are going on? So I can then assess what's major, what's moderate, and what do we need to do to make sure people can work through that and they know what's happening. Let me just take you back to the slides. So now I'll stop going on about impact assessments, but I think you get the gist. It's important to sense check and make sure you understand. So my second thing is, do you have a plan? Or what is your strategy? So for IT projects, like you just saw, it's not just about all that tech stuff that I was just talking about. Once we understand that, the second thing is have a plan on a page. Have a think about what's going on, because it's not always clear cut. It may be a technical project and it might seem like just an app is going live, but you should wrap up the streams of work and work on how it's perceived by staff. Consider things like, what are the strategic pillars of your organisation? Does this change that's happening, does it link to one? For example, is there a strategic program about modern workplace or modern ways of working? What's in it for me, for your people, and how can you make this appealing to them? Or what do they need to learn and what's the plan for that? So 2 quick examples. Firstly, Microsoft Teams. Yes, it might just be a new app, but consider things like who will control team creation and what are the controls in place for that? What are the apps that are available to support teamwork? Are you going to have OneNote, Planner, or even Trello to be available to put as a tab, because you know that's possible. Features that require cultural change. So personally, things like posts. When do we do a post? When we do email communication? And does that change between internal and external? Think about phasing it out. Something you might not have realised is you can just do chat and calling and remove the Teams icon, or vice versa. You could make it about Teams first or meetings first and not have a calling project yet. So how is it actually coming in? And the learning needs. It's not just about how do I chat or how do I find things. It's also about ways of working. When you create that team for a group of people, it becomes the hub and the way they work together. And how do they know when to be in there and when to be in the old way or different apps? So a couple of quick examples. This is just a really light on Teams project. But what I wanted to show here was there's streams to consider. The top area, the grey, is the technical team. You know, they've got a POC, a proof of concept. They've got a voice project to do with meeting rooms and Teams voice. And there's things even like governance to consider. And that flows into the actual organisational change work in the middle. And then that organisational change that's key is, as you can see here, to those that remember ProSci, we've got the bits of the COTA process there, awareness, you know, embedding and those keywords. So showing how they all flow into each other and at what points we're actually considering where things are happening instead of just turn it on and go live and do some training. The green stream down the bottom is the training. So having a look at some key things there, champions before everyone else. Validate content before champions, before org wide. So just get a plan on a page so you can think about how it all ties together. Example 2, Dynamic 365. So this is a Microsoft project much bigger than Teams, massive organisational change. Okay, so it's not just about the app. This was about channels of the business that will move into and how their business process changed with this tool coming in. Big focus on the varying needs of each group and how had to engage with a lot of key leaders to get them on board and get a rollout strategy locked in. Okay, so Dynamics 365 compared to Microsoft Teams, much more complex, and there was a lot of different considerations, like people were in a call center. So what was a realistic commitment to get them to be off the phone and be learning about this app? And we really had to focus on what would be successful and things like the benefits realization. So this is obviously too small for you to read, but what I just wanted to capture here again is many streams of the business. Those red lines are, pilot versus go live, and there was a lot of detail even in the top stream alone, which is the change management. The very bottom stream, communication. So again, with the comms, what are the messages? What is the overarching strategy and the strategic pillars? How do we tie it all together? So those are just two examples at different ends of complexity with a Teams app versus a major platform. So 2 plans on a page. And then the third one I wanted to show you is, this is from a large global company, but this is just the beginning steps of thoughts of a plan. So you can see again, planning and preparedness, pilot groups, org-wide. Thinking through, okay, we're going to have early adopters, we'll have a pilot, then we'll go to the business. So again, you can see just some high level stuff to begin with, thinkings of how will this thing work. So my second key tool is, however you want to make it visual, have a plan on a page, because it helps set the foundation for all the way you talk to your leaders. You show them, you talk through it, you get everyone on board and you understand together. Quick moment to pause to touch on the composition QR code. I'll pause for a sec, grab out your phones, snap that code, and let's move on to the next one. So before I finish up, number 3 is the journey of your people. So projects are not always clear cut. It may be a technical project, and we need to think about what's going on for your people. How will they understand? How will you prepare them? And the thing that's always forgotten, I think, is beyond go live. Projects often close off. Sometimes contractors actually exit and move on to their next project or next organisation. Who handles embedding? Who handles reinforcing ways of working with that app? This is one tool or one visual from a role a few years ago, which I still really love. I don't use it all the time, but I keep it in my mind, because the thing I love about this is the idea is that it's a journey for your people, and people move across from left to right, from broad awareness of what's coming to planting the seed of the learning to deep formal training, which at that point a checkpoint item would be, I know how to use it in my day-to-day job, versus then moving through embedding, which is ongoing. What are all the activities that will happen ongoing to really help transform and embed behaviour change? So I love that this makes us think about the stages people go through, and it's not just one-off training. You don't just turn on Microsoft Teams, send some comms and run some lunchtime Teams training sessions. It's not about a quick email. Comms are drafted with a purpose. It might be broad context or even a call to action, make sure you have an app on your mobile by go live day or whatever's going on. Think of stages of learning like planting the seed versus major training. Who will need what? And what often gets lost is that embedding stage. Office 365 is not set and forget. It's ongoing. There's always new apps or new features, and people can even enhance their knowledge and grow. Think about our current crisis and how we're all working from home, and think about the features Microsoft have pushed into Microsoft Teams in the last 6 weeks. It's some of the most rapid change in a tool I've seen in a long time. We've moved to 3x3, raise your hand. There are things that are coming rapidly to support this crisis. So even just those are transforming ways of working and helping people be more productive and effective and just help in a crisis. So this is the interesting thing over the years, is as I touched on at the start, maybe 5 years ago, it would have been a single product launch. I remember doing projects that were Skype for Business, blue balloons, cupcakes. It was all about one project or one app. Now, especially for those of you working in the change space, you'd be able to relate that it's cultural change now and ways of working. It's not just here's Teams. It becomes where do we do what? Diving deep into how you work together, how do you communicate, and what is collaboration across your organisation. You can't just turn it on and people know, oh, there's no more file shares, we're in the cloud, or when do I do a post versus a formal email, and how do I work with externals? What are the configurations and settings that people need to know to see what's restricted and what's available? Think about how you even use the Office 365 tools, say 2 years ago to now, or even 2 to 5 years ago. Things are very different. So this is a great visual to help you think through the journey of people from when you start to plant the seed with awareness comms and get the organisation on board to know something is changing soon versus this is the tool and this is what you need to know in your department. Another view of that might seem more familiar in projects as well is, yes, there was a plan on a page before, but having a visual that is that T minus, whether it be T minus 2 weeks or however you want to visualize it, maybe having here, this is a 12-week plan. And this was just, what is the journey for every user group once we take them through the change? This was a global project, 44,000 people, where we went literally around the world, focusing in batches. So each time we triggered a batch, we began with requirements and they started in week 1 of this journey. And we had a rolling 12-week journey for each area of the business. And as you can see there was the planning down to communication and learning. There were points where we introduced learning content or we went deeper to make them collaborate differently. So this is focused on the experience of your people from their side. Sometimes in projects, I'll say to the tech team on day 1 when we sit down, what is happening to the people on day 1 when the changes happened? And sometimes they'll say to me, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Hang on a sec. And so that's the thing is you really need to turn it around on its head. And it's not just about some technical stuff going on. Think about your people. Once you've gone through all these tools and things that I've just talked about, that really sets the foundation to allow you to have the plan in place, think through the impacts, and then this sets in train all the other things that you can do, like your campaign content, videos, emails, and even fanfare, competitions, gamification, and all that sort of stuff. One other final thing I wanted to just click on was here is just some example content. So this is a day in the life in a financial institution, showing some stepping stoning for this company a while ago through how will they move through Microsoft Teams in their day for different things they need to get done. So we had to understand their people to really pull stuff like this together. So those are my 2 cents, I guess. I'm just going to jump back into the meeting to check questions. That is what I wanted to, I guess, in sort of a bit of a lunch and learn, quick bang style, think about what can I contribute to help you think about how you deliver change within Microsoft 365 projects. They are a bit different to broad organisational change, often because they go, it might be 6 weeks or 3 months shorter. Also not maybe requiring detailed, deep documentation in the change management space, or that you don't have a lot of time. So have a think about your method and what you do for your people, and think about the tools that you use to capture the information to make sure you're supporting them through this series of things. So to finish up again, I wanted to thank the sponsors and thank everyone for dialing in. I hope you found something valuable in this session and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.